Ian is the global project leader for Bull Amaphiko, an international program aimed at developing early-stage social entrepreneurs who are using their talents and creativity to make a difference in their communities and inspiring a broader audience to do the same. He led the creation of the program in South Africa and now leads the program across 12 countries, including the US, UK, Brazil, and Turkey. Ian also consults to a number of other clients on social impact and human development strategies. Ian has 32 years of business leadership, brand strategy, communications, and research experience, both locally and internationally. And Ian has a passion for human development and a deep understanding of the dynamics and social context of township youth in South Africa. He's a regular speaker at leadership conferences and is a mentor to a number of youth-focused social enterprises. So please join me in welcoming Ian to Anderson.
Thanks, Bhavna. I was hoping you wouldn't read out the 32 years of business experience, because that makes me seem very old. But in fact, it's a good intro, because we're going to talk a lot about storytelling. And I think the title of my talk today is Storytelling for Impact, or Storytelling with Impact. Doesn't matter which preposition you put in there. And those of you as you're sort of moving into the business world, storytelling has suddenly become a buzzword. Even within sort of mainstream business, storytelling has almost become a synonym now for marketing and communications. The same with the word narrative. Everybody's using the word narrative now. And 32 years ago, when I started my career, I started in the advertising industry. So not quite as long ago as Mad Men, okay? So I wasn't quite in that era. But I started my career as a graduate trainee at Ogilvy and Mather in the UK in the late 1980s. So I am giving my age away now. And that was like the heyday of the advertising industry. Anybody above junior vice president was driving a Ferrari. The champagne trolley came round at 5 o'clock every day, literally, champagne trolley. And it was this heyday of the sort of the golden age of advertising. But at that time, the focus, everything was about brevity. Yeah? It was all around, you've got to get that message across in as short a format as possible. So it was the birth of the 30-second TV commercial, or the fact that if you're driving past a billboard, you only have supposedly 2 seconds to see the billboard. So you should never have more than 5 words on a billboard. Even when you were writing a brief for the creative team and you were trying to capture the whole business challenge that this creative brief had to solve, if you wrote it on more than one side of an A4 piece of paper, it was thrown out. It was all around brevity. So the opportunity to really build and grow stories was remote. And it was all about, storytelling was an indulgence in those days. And a lot of business people still maybe think of storytelling as something that we don't really have time for in this modern age. The irony was that once you developed a concept for a TV commercial, you went to the likes of David Putnam or Ridley Scott, who are amazing film directors, and get them to make the 30-second TV commercial, even though they're used to making things that last 2 hours. So there was a little bit of a contradiction there. But now, in this modern age of social media, where you're not as limited to kind of 30-second spots, etc., there's far more freedom to start exploring this thing called storytelling. And human beings, obviously, since time immemorial, have told stories. That's the way information has been shared. That's the way traditions have been shared. It's the way culture has been shared. But a lot of work has been done in recent years to understand why stories, and particularly stories about purpose, about human endeavor, have become more prevalent. Does anybody know, I'm sure there's a few hands about to go up, a talk by Simon Sinek called Start With Why? It's the Golden Circle. A few people there. So you recognize this slide. And he says that the most powerful stories, and this is general sort of business communication, the most powerful stories are the stories that start with why. Usually when companies market themselves or advertise themselves or anybody introduces themselves, you start with what you do. Yeah? So I am a such and such, I'm in such and such an industry. And when you're presenting logical information, that operates at a sort of very rational neocortex level. So I'm sharing information with you, you process it, but there's very little engaging response. However, if you start with the why, and you explain that in fundamental human terms, that connects with a different part of our brain called the limbic brain, which is where it's a non-cognitive but very much a fundamental processing of emotions. And recently, am I allowed to mention the Harvard Business School? It's not like it's a competitor or anything, yeah? Okay, so that school on the East Coast, had just in the Harvard Business Review, just published a really interesting article of a study that was done by one of their neuroscience team, where they literally sampled blood from people who had just been through what we would classify as an emotive, character-led story, okay? And what they noticed is that the levels of a hormone called oxytocin, and I'm not a neuroscientist, okay, so I'm an ad guy, all right? So, but from what I understand, oxytocin is your empathy drug. It's that little bit of somebody's shaking their head up there, something like that. Close, yeah. So it basically, it's a hormone that stimulates feelings of connection with other human beings, connections on an emotional level, and a willingness to collaborate. Okay, so that the power of engaging people in character-led emotional stories is far more effective at eliciting a response where people want to do something with you. Okay, so if you're an entrepreneur pitching to a group of funders, to a foundation, to a group of beneficiaries, whether you're an impact intrapreneur, that I believe some of you are heading towards, you're trying to change things within the company, so you're presenting to your board of directors, to your executives, trying to get them to engage in something. Or if you are one of your students, and I believe you're all preparing for a presentation on the 8th of March, yeah, where you're reporting back on the projects that you've been doing for all these amazing organizations around the world. And I know a couple of people who are going to be in the audience on those things. Even then, I know some of those projects are very sort of data-driven. You know, I've seen the sort of the summary of what you guys are presenting. And a lot of it is hard, factual stuff. But the power of it, if you're trying to convince, whether it's the executives of that foundation, whoever's in the audience, if you're wanting to elicit some form of action, then really what hopefully I'm going to share with you today will give you a framework for doing that. And that to be able to tell the story of those numbers in a more human way, in a more character-led way, is important. So just quickly, so that's chapter 1. Meanwhile, for those of you, Bhavna mentioned a little bit about Red Bull Amaphiko. I just want to set the context for this because a lot of the exercises that we're going to go through and some of the things I'm going to get you to do were designed for social entrepreneurs. And as Bhavna mentioned, we work in our program primarily with the people who are in the communities where the problems exist, okay? So whether you call them grassroots, whatever, but ultimately the project is premised on the fact that the people closest to the problems should be the people closest to the solutions. And obviously, you guys are all doing amazing, you've all got big dreams and big ambitions, but often, sometimes when the people from outside those communities come in and solve other people's problems, it can lead to other problems. So it's very much about developing those grassroots entrepreneurs. And having spoken about the power of a character-driven story, I'd like to show you a short film about one of the first entrepreneurs that we worked with in South Africa.
When you look at the issue of plastic pollution, looking at that and saying, there's so much potential. I don't even see plastic anymore. I see our material, I see our textile, I see color. I started a company with a friend of mine, Rhea, and what we do is repurpose school bags. So this is an upcycled, solar-powered school bag. Being able to recognize the value in this could actually be something that could help so many kids out there, you know, that could create so many jobs, and then say, I'm actually going to pick it up and hopefully make something worthwhile and meaningful. Yes, I'm very business minded, but I have so much empathy for people and how business can actually be in that space, and profit not being a driver but coming as a consequence of actually doing good in the community. The bag is made from 20 plastic bags that we upcycle and turn into a purpose textile. And then we take that and we sew it up into a neat, durable backpack. On each bag, we've got a reflective material, and then we've got the solar panel. While a child is walking to school, the solar panel is charging, and when a child gets back home, you can simply take it out, put it on the dryer, and then they can use it as a light to study. Looking at what we've managed to accomplish with pretty much no marketing budget, you know, and reach the likes of Bill Gates and not having to pay him to tweet about us, but doing that through work that matters, I think that is huge. For someone such as Bill Gates to recognize us firstly as creative was huge. It validated that as a creative, you don't need maths or to be a scientist to make an impact in the world. Amaphiko is the Zulu word for wings. As a social entrepreneur, once you decide to go on this journey, you need to be able to jump and know that you have wings and you will actually not fall, but you will fly. Amaphiko presents an opportunity for young people to belong to a community where you feel like I'm not alone in this, you know, that I'm part of a group of people that think differently about what could happen in this country and this continent. We've managed to pretty much employ 8 people out of waste. Everything has value. Everything should have a purpose. We live in a world where we need a new generation of young people telling a different story for what is possible. How long are we going to wait for people to realize our greatness?
Okay, so that's Tato, and she's the kind of person that we work with. We run an academy program currently in about to be in 4 continents, and we focus. You know, a lot of development programs for social entrepreneurs just focus on the business aspects, the funding, the impact measurement, the revenue generation. But for people like Tato who come from pretty tough environments, there's a lot of personal development that needs to happen. So we work on resilience, we work on creativity, we work on agility, we work on their sense of purpose. But one of the big things that we work on with them is their ability to tell a story. And often their story, which is so connected to them as human beings and to their community, you know, we tend to think of telling stories or pitching to, as I mentioned before, to funders or foundations or beneficiaries, but often they've got to tell a very powerful story to their mother to explain why they're not just going out to get a job and why they have this sense of purpose and why they must just be patient, and this will all come right. So Tata's an example of the people we work with. We work with a whole bunch of amazing people. We've got an academy program. We've put about 120 social entrepreneurs through those programs in South Africa, Brazil, and here in the US. I just spent the last weekend, for those of you who work with Gail Northrop. Gail has been a coach and mentor to some of our entrepreneurs, and she was just with me in Baltimore this last weekend as we were wrapping up our first 18-month cohort in the US. So anyway, so that's a little bit of context to Amaphiko. And was anybody listening when Tato said Amaphiko is the Zulu word for wings? And you can figure why that was chosen for Red Bull, can't you? Yeah, okay, yeah. But just on that point, again, before we get fully into the storytelling, the important thing about the way we run the Amaphiko project is it is not a corporate social responsibility initiative that's run kind of by a team of people down the corridor. You know, this is run unashamedly as a core marketing pillar of the business. You know, Red Bull supports athletes, it supports musicians and dancers. So why shouldn't we support social entrepreneurs, people who are actually doing something good in the world? And we take some of those learnings from about high performance, about human potential, and apply it to this amazing group of people. And the principle is, you know, in a world where, you know, the consumer market now is made up largely of millennials and increasingly Gen Z, you know, those consumers are hardwired to expect companies to do good, not just to make their money by fair means or foul during the course of the year and then write out a big check at the end of the year, you know, so they do well and then do good. Nowadays, consumers won't let you do well unless you're doing good in the day-to-day core operations of your business. And not everybody can be a Patagonia, but every business, you know, and this isn't going away. This is not a fad. This is not just a trend. This is going to be fundamental to any corporate, that it's got to align its day-to-day operations with its core values with a social impact. Okay, so it's very important that you understand that's how we do it. And we do that because we want people to think well of Red Bull, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing, you know, this culture of if you're doing good, it's got to be non-profit. Has to disappear. Okay, sorry. A little bit of preaching there. Sorry about that. So, storyteller, and it's quite appropriate given that I've never been in Los Angeles before on the night of the Oscars, so it was quite fun. Although I landed a bit late to make it. But so we're going to borrow some storytelling techniques from the movies, okay? Because they're often some of the best storytellers in the world are living in this city. And so I'm going to take you through 3 different kind of story frameworks that hopefully will be useful for you to use and to borrow and steal unashamedly in any storytelling opportunity that you have. Okay? So having introduced you to Tato, here's another inspiring character who you might recognize. And his story is exactly the same as his story, is exactly the same as her story, which funnily enough is exactly the same as his story, and a person very dear to my heart, his story. Okay? And a lot of you will know, you might have guessed where I'm going with this, of Joseph Campbell's theory of the hero's journey, okay? Which Joseph Campbell, many years ago, did an analysis of all the great stories in the world, all the sort of, you know, some of the early stories that became, you know, sort of the basis of the Quran, of the Bible, all those great myths, and he discovered that they all work on the same narrative arc. They all have the same chapters to them. Just a show of hands of those of you who are familiar with the hero's journey. Okay, so probably 30-40%. So just bear with me, but I'm hoping you'll now see the relevance to how to use this framework in how you tell the story. So the hero's journey, if you imagine it as a clock starting at 1 o'clock, and then we're going to progress around, and I'm going to tell you a very mishmashed story of lots of different movies to show that it actually sort of works. What you see in the inner circle there is the kind of location of where this happens. So there's something happening, and in the top half of the circle, it's happening in the ordinary world. And in the lower part of the circle, it's happening in this world of adventure and world of challenge. So it starts with our hero, whoever that may be, living their ordinary life, and they have limited awareness of a problem. So there's something happening in their daily lives, and they suddenly start to be aware of it. And then they get more aware of it, and they start thinking, well, actually, there's something wrong here. And obviously, I'm going to frame this also through a sort of social entrepreneur framework. So there's something wrong, and they feel that calling to go and do something about it. But then they turn back because they're not convinced that they can do anything about it. Yeah, so they're scared, and there's a sort of refusal of that call. And then they usually have a conversation with somebody. Yeah. Now, Luke Skywalker, it's, what's his name? Obi-Wan Kenobi. For Rocky, it's his old trainer, or it's Adrian, his wife. And eventually they decide, okay, so now I am going to move forward with this now. I am going to take on this challenge. So they overcome their fear, and they cross the threshold into this new world. So their world, even if it's just psychologically, now has changed. They're now thinking, this is now my calling. This is what I'm here to do. And then at that point, this is when they start trying things and experimenting with this new challenge. And this is typically the scene in the movies where they compress like 3 months of training into 2 minutes of a music video, yeah? Like, so you've got Rocky running along the beach with the music pumping, and he's doing his one-arm push-ups, and then eventually he runs up the steps of the Philadelphia Public Library, and I have 2 teenage daughters, so anybody know the movie Mulan? Anybody with teenage daughters or going to have teenager daughters, you better watch that movie, okay? And that's the scene where Mulan is now training with the army on how to fire the arrows and all of that. So it's always done to music. So that's the bit where they sort of compress the story, and all of a sudden you're now ready, okay? Miraculously, in 2 minutes, you're now ready to do all of that. And then it's time to apply that. So it's time to go and slay the dragon, or it's time for Rocky to get in the ring with Apollo Creed, yeah? And so you approach that innermost cave, and then you have the fight. So it's that battle to the death, and then okay, we're really mixing the metaphors now. You go and grab the sword from the stone like Arthur, yeah, and you slay the dragon, and then you head off on your way back. So we're now heading back into the normal world, okay? But then just as you think you've made it, as always happens in the movies, they're shooting the hero at the back, and the guy he thought he killed suddenly appears behind him again as that final challenge, just when you think you're getting home. So he has to go and slay the dragon again, or overcome those final challenges, ultimately to return back to the community with, the elixir of life, whether he's defeated the Death Star, whether it's beaten Apollo Creed, whatever, he's now come full circle. So if you think of that journey for Mahatma Gandhi, yeah, having literally leaving, there's a South African connection here. He grew up as a lawyer in South Africa, and then eventually had a calling, went back to India, went through all of the struggles, and it follows exactly this arc, okay? So whilst we never encourage our entrepreneurs to think of themselves as heroes, because that can be a bit of a problem, yes, they've got to be confident in themselves, but ultimately this helps them in different environments tell their story as a framework, okay? So there's lots of literature on the hero's journey online, so just go and borrow it with pride. But so this could be the story of a foundation, or a non-profit organization, or a social enterprise, or a corporation. But it's just a way of telling a story, the chapters of a story, that is really valuable. Okay. So the next framework I want to use, so it's in a world where, but to do it justice, I have to do it in the proper voice, in a world where. Okay, which is the movie trailer. Okay, so having said that the likes of Ridley Scott need 2 hours to tell a story, the real geniuses in Hollywood are the ones who take the movie and edit it into a 90-second trailer. Yeah, and there are various chapters there's a sort of structure to a movie trailer, and this is usually how it works. So think of, and the way I want you to think of this is whether it's, again, depending on what projects you're working on, what organizations you're with or working with, think of how you would write a movie trailer for your organization. And it usually starts with the setting of the scene. In a world where, and a problem exists, okay? So in a world where some people, You fill in the blanks, okay? The next thing is our world is in mortal danger. What will happen if this problem isn't solved? This problem is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And only this hero can save us. And again, take this, what I just said, we're not trying to make it seem like it's a hero, but in the context of a movie trailer. But this organization, so substitute the word hero for an organization. So this organization has the skill, the talent, the belief, the purpose, the energy to solve this. The question is, can they do it in time? Yeah? So what we're going to do, and you can do it, we're not going to, the final exercise we're going to go through is really fun. Not that this isn't, hopefully this is fun. But as we go through it, I want you to just sort of sketch it out and fill in the blanks as we go through it. So, in a world where, I want you to think of a project, either a project that you're specifically involved in, whether it's a non-profit organization, a business, your own budding social enterprise, a thing that you're trying to get off the ground with some friends. So what is the situation? So in a world where these people need this, yeah? So what is the beneficiary or the audience, and what is their problem, okay? And what is it that they need? So if we did this for Tato, in a world where young school kids in rural South Africa have no access to electricity to study by, and they need, Tato solves a whole bunch of problems, and they live in a world of plastic pollution, and they live in a world where they carry their school bags literally in a plastic shopping bag, where they need the dignity of carrying their books, but in a bag that can, or in a way that can help with their education. One, socially enterprising, Tato Katlanye, will rise or return the challenge, embark on a journey to change the world by equipping every young scholar with the opportunity to study, to do their homework, to make something of themselves, and to reach their full potential. So this is the story of, and in Tato's case, repurposed school bags. Okay? Now, often in a pitch situation, a lot of these entrepreneurs, sadly, when they're first starting their business, they're bootstrapping themselves by going to pitching competitions, or accelerators will run various things, and they're given literally 5 or 10 minutes to pitch their story. So, and a lot of them get lost in the detail. They get lost in the statistics, in the facts. And yes, those facts are absolutely necessary, but as I said at the beginning, what engages people the most is the why. It's why are you doing this? Why do you feel so driven, so purposeful about this mission? And this framework, literally we've run workshops with these entrepreneurs where they stand up and literally in 45 seconds, they articulate the vision for their business by using this exact framework. And it's like this light bulb moment. In fact, we did this in Baltimore, a project from West Baltimore. Amazing woman who'd been trying to articulate what she was doing and would always just head off down these blind alleys. And we got her to write her business as a movie trailer, and she burst into tears because it all made sense. Yeah. So, keeping with the movie theme, so this is. So I want you to pay attention now because this is where some of you are going to be doing some presenting. Okay. How are we doing for time? Okay. So Nemo, you'll see in the corner. We're not taking credit for this. This is Pixar in a box. Is anybody familiar with Pixar in a box? You all know Pixar, but do you know Pixar in a box? Do yourselves a favor. It's an amazing resource that they've put online. It's part of the Khan Academy, so you'll find it under the Khan Academy, and it's basically open sourcing all their knowledge about animation storytelling to anybody who wants to do it. So it's an amazing initiative on their part. And what they say, they talk a lot at Pixar about the story spine. And pretty much any movie that they've made, if you think from Nemo to Cars to WALL-E to, what else have they done? Toy Story. All of those follow this framework. And this is the one you've got to pay attention to because you're going to do this exercise. So it starts with once upon a time and every day until one day, because of this, and because of that, and because of that, until finally, and ever since then. Okay? Every story that Pixar makes follows that structure. Okay? So let me tell you this story for Nemo. And it's funny, when you think of Nemo, the story isn't actually about Nemo, it's about Marlin, his dad. Yeah? So does everybody's watching Finding Nemo, yeah? Okay, so let's do it for them. So once upon a time, there was a fish called Marlin who loved his son Nemo very much. And every day, he tried to protect him from the dangers of the ocean. Until one day, Nemo swam a little bit close to the drop-off and got kidnapped by a scuba diver. And because of this, Marlin had to leave the safety of his home and venture into this scary ocean. And because of that, he met sharks and jellyfishes and all sorts of dangers. And because of that, he eventually had to make a leap of faith and just believe that he could continue on this journey. Until finally, let me get this one right. Yeah, until finally he realized that he had to trust Nemo, and that he had to just let Nemo find his own way of saving his friend Dory from the fishing net, if you remember at the end. And ever since then, Marlin trusted Nemo and gave Nemo the space to live his life and grow into looking after himself. So it's really, the story of Nemo, of Marlin and Nemo, is really about parents letting their children go. Yeah? That's really what all the film is about. So this also as a framework is a really, really, really cool framework for telling your story as an organization. Okay, so we're going to do this, and then I'm going to show you how you apply it to an organization. And then I want you all, as we're going through this, to pick a business, a social business. Yeah? Or it can be for-profit, non-profit. As I said earlier, it could be a project you're trying to get off the ground. It could be a big corporation that one of you is working for, and that you're trying to embed a new narrative, a new story. Okay, so try and get in your mind what project or what business you're going to tell the story of. And this is how it works. So your story. So once upon a time, what was the problem that existed? Yeah, what is the situation that your company finds itself in? Yeah? And what is their reason for being? What is the problem that existed? And every day, what does that problem look like? Yeah? So what does it look like? How do you bring that to life in a human, dramatic way? So again, in Tato's case, it was, and every day kids got home to a house or literally a shack that had no electricity, ran on paraffin lamps, that was a health hazard and dangerous. Okay, the next one. Until one day, then all of a sudden it's yourselves, so your company or your team or your project, arrived with this solution. Yeah? And because of this, because you did this, all of a sudden, this happened. Yeah? So what was the first thing that happened when you first started trying this? Now, importantly, just a quick time out on this one. Some of this, you can tell this right from the end, so it's all in the past. Yeah? But for a lot of social enterprises, they might just be at this stage now. So they might have identified their problem, and they might have done the first thing. Just tell me, who knows the logic model? Are you familiar with the logic model? Which is a kind of theory of change. So it's a theory that, this is what we are doing and why we're doing it. So this is our purpose. We have inputs and activities, and then we have outputs and we have outcomes. And it's a way, and Gail Northrop is an expert on this, if you ever want to learn more about it. So in a way, this becomes your theory of change. So because of this, something happened, and because of that, what was the outcome of that? Yeah? And because of that, what was the bigger consequence? So often when you're working in the world of impact, you don't have always a direct, immediate causal result. Yeah? You do something which changes somebody's mindset, and as a result of that mindset being changed, they behave in a different way, and because they behave in a different way, they achieve something. Yeah? So it's a theory of change. How is it going to work? So because of that, until finally, what was the result of it? How did that, from going to every day when the problem looked in a particular way, until finally, what was the result of that? What did it look like? And ever since then, what does the future look like now for the beneficiaries of the project? Sorry, I confused you a bit. So that final thing about what does it look like for those people. So it's the little boy in Tato's video walking home, and now he has light to study by. Yeah? So I want you to spend 5 minutes applying this framework to your business or to your project. Okay? And then we'll see who's brave enough to put their hand up and tell the story. Okay. Any questions at this point? And as I say, you can be anywhere. It might be that you've identified the problem and you've got an idea as to what the solution is, but you haven't implemented it. But project forward what your theory is. So if we do this, this will happen, and this is our vision as to what the world could look like. Or if it's a project that is up and running, it's all in the past. So this is what we've done, this is what happened, and now this is the situation. Okay? And for those of you who are presenting on the 8th of March to all those nice organizations, just think of, even if you're presenting lots of data, just think about how you might use this structure to tell that story. Okay, so I'll give you 5 minutes. Okay, so do we have any budding storytellers in the audience? Anybody want to go first? I saw a couple of team collaborations going on here. One over here, one over here. But come on, you're in a safe space. It might not be an award-winning, Oscar-nominated story, but let's just see if it helped.
Sure.
Okay.
Should I get up?
Yeah, please.
So, once upon a time, we lived in a world where medical errors run rife, and every day people were hurt because surgeries occurred on the wrong sites or on the wrong patients. Until finally, Dr. Peter Pronovost introduced the medical checklist. And because of this, errors were reduced by doing a timeout and using a checklist, similar to the airline industry. And because of that, more research was done into making hospitals safer. And because of that, the hospitals nationwide adopted the system until finally patient safety has improved. And ever since then, there has been more focus on making patients safe.
Sure. That was great. Yeah, it just shows how the flow and the consequence and built the theory of change because that happened, and because that happened, that happened. Excellent. Okay, who's next? Thank you. Okay.
Once upon a time, there were only homes that burned fossil fuel inefficiently. And every day it drove the oil industry to dig deeper for reserves and disrupt nature's habitats, threatening polar bears and other such animals' survival. Until one day, this design-build firm found a way to build a home using no fossil fuel, maximizing energy efficiency, producing net zero carbon homes. Because of this, one could choose to live comfortably knowing that one does not have to burn fossil fuel and minimize one's impact on the environment. Because of that, there was less oil exploration that needed to be done. Because of that, the natural habitat was increasingly preserved until finally the polar bear and other threatened species increased their population. Ever since then, polar bears and other endangered species will be at lower risk of extinction.
Wow. Brilliant. Excellent. And it's just it's literally once upon a time. It's what we all grew up with as kids. Yeah? It's just using that framework to tell more complicated stories. So you just revolutionized the medical industry. You just revolutionized the sustainability industry in a very simple framework of telling that impact. And what you can do, again, for those, the projects that are working on some of those 6-month assignments, where you've got some data to get across. It's like, how do you plug your data? How do you know what facts to tell where in that structure? Yeah? And that data might be levels of investment, it might be expenditure, it might be impact, whatever it may be. But there's a place in this framework for those numbers to be put in. But it'll be that much more powerful to deliver those numbers in a human framework, in a human story. Okay. Any last one? Come on, we need 3. Yes, please.
Once upon a time, women like Louise would navigate their cancer diagnosis alone. And every day they would experience the devastation of chemo-induced hair loss. Until one day, Louise's best friend Sandra offered to lovingly shave her hair in her children's hair salon. And because of this, Sandra closed the hair salon and opened Compassionate Beauty. Because of that, she learned about all of the products and services that women need to look and feel their best through their cancer journey. Until finally, Sandra had created a full retail and oncology spa. And ever since then, thousands of women have navigated their journey with knowledge, dignity, and confidence.
Wow. Amazing. Sure. Very powerful. Yeah, and so again, you just, in less than a minute there, you just told a really powerful story. So the point I made at the beginning about 30-second TV commercials, and you can tell stories in short spaces of time. If you've only got 5 minutes to pitch, you can tell amazingly, amazingly powerful stories. Okay, on the assumption that there's nobody else who wants to volunteer. Okay, we'll just wrap it up. So keeping the movie theme, so the final cut. So this, and I know a lot of you obviously have spent time in a corporate environment, or you've done presentation skills training or whatever that, so I'm not going to lecture you on that, but there are some final thoughts I want to share with you about the final delivery of what you do. And it's this principle. Now this quote has been attributed to Oscar Wilde, but I think Mark Twain is the usual target for this. Please excuse the long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one. Yeah. And basically that is saying, sometimes we just put so much stuff into presentations particularly, and into PowerPoint slides, that it's far, far more difficult to be selective and just choose a few words, not to write really long sentences. And this is where, so it's about editing at this point. Yeah, so you've got your narrative, and I mean, you did an amazing job of keeping it very focused and very short. And so, as always in life, it's not what you want to tell people, it's what people are able to hear. And if I throw 5 tennis balls at you, you'll drop all 5 of them, but if I throw them one at a time, then you'll catch them all. Yeah? So remember that. And then my hero, the text has gone funny there. So it's one of them, and I'm a blues guitarist, and this is my motto. He always said to play the blues, it's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play. Yeah? It's the silence in between the notes that delivers the feelings. Yeah? It's that anticipation, it's that agony of waiting for the next note that creates the response. And if you think of the best public speakers, if you think of Barack Obama, this is a blue state, huh? We're in safe space here, yeah? Okay, okay. So, Barack Obama, as we know, he's probably one of the finest orators of modern times. But what makes him an amazing orator is not the words he says, it's the gaps he leaves between them, yeah? He just lands something. And then the tension starts to build, and you think, please say something, please say something. And then he says the next thing. And he just manages to build such tension in what he delivers by those pauses, those pregnant pauses. And they're called pregnant pauses because literally things get born out of them. Yeah. So just remember that when you're presenting, that take the time. And just a final anecdote, a good friend of mine who's one of the best public speakers I've ever seen. Once she was on stage at a big conference and she had a complete mental block. She just lost her track. And so she stopped talking and just started strolling up down the stage, desperately trying to remember what she was supposed to be saying. And then she couldn't remember what it was. And she said, well, thank you. And she got the most rapturous ovation because everybody thought she'd become so moved by this subject matter that she just couldn't talk anymore. You know, that she just felt this thing so intently that everybody applauded and thought, wow, that was amazing. So silence is powerful, yeah? So silence is really powerful. So use it when you deliver it. Don't put too much in. Think, and again, I didn't put it up here, but there's another, Le Corbusier, who's one of the masters of modern design, says great design is not when there's nothing left to add, it's when there's nothing left to take away. Yeah? So that's how I think you should remember it. So finally, in any sort of pitch situation, and anybody who's been in sales, ever been in sales, selling something, you'll know that you sell with your ears, not your mouth. It's about listening. It's about, particularly when you've presented and bombarded people with this information, you know, it's their response, it's their questions that are far more important than what you've given them. So, as somebody clever once said, you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion. Thank you very much. I hope it was useful.